Okay, so let's start with the obvious. So as Sana said, this is very different than previous events that we've had, but it's kind of old hat, I suppose, after a year. But it is important to acknowledge that everything is different, not the least of which just sort of how disrupted things have been for kids and adults on the spectrum, for families, kids in and out of school, the over the course of the year, just changes in access to service. And that's even for individuals who already had access to service. Certainly at the Glenrose, we recognize how challenging it's been for adults and families who've been looking for initial diagnosis and trying to keep up with the needs during the pandemic, where there's been such restrictions around in-person activity. It's had a tremendous impact on the Glenrose and the research center as a whole. We've had to really scale back considerably on the work that we do. Given that until recently, most of the contact that we've had with families has been virtual, and really kind of minimizing contact directly, especially when the cases were high. It really kind of shut down a lot of our clinical assessment activity. We actually ended up losing two wonderful staff who I'm glad have moved on to other career opportunities, but I did want to give a special acknowledgement to Anna Richardson and Olivia Conlon, who are actually not working currently at their Autism Research Center. So obviously lots of changes, not most of which have not been positive. But we've continued to make progress. It's certainly been kind of a humbling time where I think we've all taken stock of our priorities and really thought seriously about what we can do to continue to improve care and support families. So one of the positives for us was being able to advance some of our research and get the information out to inform pediatricians and to really think broadly around our early diagnosis and intervention. So in the past year, we were able to share some information from our infant sibling study, a study looking at early signs of autism in younger siblings. And this paper really reflected the entire time that we've been working here at the Glenrose in Edmonton. Collectively, between Edmonton and other sites in Canada, 500 families that participated who had an older sibling with autism, as well as 180 families who kindly spent time with us, helping us understand sort of the range of development in kids who don't have an older sibling with autism. From that, we recognize that there are a number of signs that we were able to recognize during a brief interactive assessment that really gave us clear information about which of those infants were most likely to go on to develop autism. And a lot of the signs that you can see listed here really reflect what we see somewhat later in life, and also, more importantly, what families have been telling us for many years, that children who end up developing autism, and depicted in this graph, are the younger siblings who end up developing a diagnosis of autism by the age of 3. By the age of 12 months, they're showing many more of these early signs compared to the younger siblings who don't end up with a diagnosis, and also to those infants who don't have a family history. And a lot of these features will be really familiar to you. So not responding when their name is called, not as vocal and not babbling back and forth, difficulty establishing eye contact, and then some of the behavioral differences as well. So having difficulty moving between activities, getting stuck on particular toys and activities, and getting preoccupied with some of the sensory aspects of play material. One of the challenges, though, of course, is that this is an interactive assessment. The pandemic has been particularly poignant because we realize that an assessment that requires in-person contact won't always be able to be applied. And thinking about how to get this information out into the community, we realize that we need something that may be a bit simpler, that a broader range of professionals could use. So as a result of that, a number of years ago, we adapted that interactive assessment, that play assessment, to be a parent questionnaire that parents could complete, and could even complete in a community physician's office. So our initial experience with this questionnaire was in partnership with families who had a child with autism as well as a younger infant. And under Lori's leadership, we were able to get a paper out in the past year showing that some of these features, including reduced back and forth vocalization and not responding to name are things that parents will report on spontaneously based on this questionnaire. And it gave us hope that we could take the lessons we've learned from the infant SIB study and take it out into the community. And with the support of the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation, and specifically the Stollery Stollery Kids Lab that Anissa spoke about, we've adapted the questionnaire that we had initially used in siblings to be a bit more applicable to the broader community. So, for example, we renamed the questionnaire the parent-rated observation of communication, emotion, and social skills, so that it would be more meaningful to families who haven't already had an experience with autism. And again, we've sort of taken some of the questions that we learned about through our interactive scale and formatted it as a questionnaire. And right now we're assessing this in the general community, initially in Toronto in a large network of pediatric and family physicians offices, and hoping to implement it in Edmonton as well when we can reconnect with our preschool rehabilitation colleagues, I think, as sort of further restrictions related to the pandemic lift. You know, at the same time, we've been so focused on finding earlier and early signs of autism. We've also recognized that that's not going to be the entire answer to the bottlenecks we have in the system around access to diagnosis. I think for many years, we've assumed that if we could only identify autism earlier, we could be making the diagnosis much, much earlier for the broad range of kids. But we recognize both the diversity of autism and how it's expressed early in life, but more to the point that bottlenecks in the system aren't just related to knowledge of early signs, but rather the ability to offer assessments. And as autism's become a more and more frequently recognized condition across the lifespan, we realize that we need to take new approaches to build capacity in the system for diagnostic assessment. This has been emphasized. There's a lot of dialogue about this in the literature. I think maybe one silver lining related to the pandemic is that I think it's made us a little bit more open-minded and needing to be a little more creative and nimble in terms of how we offer our services. And I think in that spirit, here at the Glenrose, we've started working with community pediatricians in the community, actually building on some of the work that we initially did through the Autism Treatment Network. There's a telehealth based approach called Project Echo, which really allows a center like the Glenrose to connect with a number of community professionals and medical practices to just share information, have a chance to talk about patients that the community physicians are seeing and other community professionals. And more recently, a chance to do actually some training in diagnostic assessment, support the physicians as they're starting to initially see preschool children, and then discuss those cases online. So, and through the pandemic, we've actually adapted this approach so that the community physicians are actually learning virtual models that involve connecting with parents, having the parents conduct some play activities with their kids so that there's an opportunity to observe early behavior. And we're really hopeful that this will start to expand capacity in the Edmonton area so that families aren't having to wait so long. And our hope as well is that we can extend this approach to across the lifespan and perhaps even as a way to build capacity for adult diagnosis. We have a small clinic at the Glenrose that's been a huge asset, but we realize that adults have huge challenges in accessing diagnostic assessment. Another really exciting development has been that the Social ABCs, which is a intervention program that's developed by our partners that are part of the Canadian Infant SIB study, led by Jessica Bryan and Susan Bryson, and with a wonderful extended team that's included Sana here in Edmonton, that over the past few years, after it was developed and evaluated and shown to be effective in supporting parents in engaging with their infants in such ways that helps them further their communication development and emotional connectiveness, we're at the point where we're preparing to offer it clinically at the Glenrose. So this is really quite a unique intervention in terms of being targeted to really very young infants under 30 months of age, and we're hoping through support with the Stollery to even extend it to infants showing early signs even under a year. It is a parent coaching intervention, which means that rather than the interventionist working hands-on with these infants and toddlers, they guide parents through some of the strategies, and it makes it much more adaptable and much more scalable, especially at a time during the pandemic. Sana has played an instrumental role in training some of the clinicians at the Glenrose, and they're just preparing to make it available to infants and toddlers that are being referred in. So we'll keep you posted about that. Just on a sobering note, certainly the pandemic has affected child health and pediatric care more broadly, and we've been fortunate to be working with a number of wonderful colleagues, including David Nicholas in the Faculty of Social Work, technically at the University of Calgary, but fortunate for us, actually based in Edmonton, who's been leading a national study understanding the impact of the pandemic on healthcare for children. The results of an initial roundtable were published last year, and David and his team, which actually includes Olivia, who formerly worked with us on the Pathway study at the Autism Research Center, have been working with healthcare providers and families to really understand the day-to-day impact on healthcare access and experience throughout the pandemic. To end on a brighter note, one of the exciting papers that have come out of our Pathway study, so this is a study of at 5 sites, 5 different provinces across the country, including in Edmonton, following along children diagnosed with autism as preschoolers, many of whom have actually now grown into adolescence. One of the assessments that we've done is actually sitting down with families and asking them about the best things about their kids. And this is a really important reframe. I think we often focus on the challenges and differences in autism and not necessarily the strengths. And I'm sure it won't surprise any of the clinicians and parents and autistics in the group to recognize that there are huge strengths among the autistic kids and clients that we work with and that are part of our communities. So some of the things that were identified by parents included as strengths and exceptional traits included love and kindness and happiness and a sense of humor. As these kids were followed over time, another thing that parents recognized was just the incredible resilience of their children as they're navigating challenges in the school system. So thanks. I appreciate the chance to touch base with all of you, share some of the work, also acknowledge the challenges of the pandemic and how much we appreciate your ongoing dedication to supporting your kids and also kind of helping out with the research projects that are leading to our ability to share these kinds of findings. So again, special thanks to the Autism Research Center team, the speakers today, all our wonderful colleagues at the Glenrose, as well as in community organizations that have been such tremendous strength for kids, adults, and families. Our funders, particularly the Stollery Children's Hospital Foundation Chair in Autism, which is a major sponsor of our Family Information Day today. So thanks, and I've probably talked way too long, but I'll turn it back to Sana. Thank you.